Hi everyone, Reverend Caleb Murdell here, and this is your video for Acts chapter 5. Now, there are some cool things and some interesting and weird and maybe distressing things that happen here in Acts chapter 5. So we have a lot to dig into today. So, first in verses 1 through 11, we have this interesting and disturbing story of what happens to Ananias and Sapphira. So, I'm going to be honest with you. When we set out to do this project, the Acts Challenge, this is the story. These are the verses that I am least excited to talk about because this is one of those stories from the Bible where you just kind of like take a deep breath and a sigh and like roll your eyes and just go, okay, Bible, that was weird, and I don't know what to do with that story, and I'm just going to keep reading. And this is one of those things. And there's plenty of stories like this in the Bible where just weird stuff happens, and you're just like, okay, that was interesting. So, in this story, and this is a direct follow on from what we just read in chapter 4, where the community centered around the disciples and the story of Jesus and the resurrection is growing, and people are so moved by the community and the message that they are selling their possessions, bringing them to the disciples, and holding all things in common, as we read in both chapters 2 and in chapter 4. And to start chapter 5, we hear this story where this couple, Ananias and Sapphira, are doing this. They have sold their possessions and they bring it to the disciples. However, they are not honest and forthcoming in the details of that financial transaction. They tell the disciples, one thing, in reality is another in terms of how much they sold it for, assumedly in this story so that they could keep some back for themselves. And Peter calls them out on that because Peter apparently just kind of knows a whole lot of things in this story, somehow, supernaturally, miraculous, whatever. And then they die. It almost sounds like Peter just somehow has them die. And I'm going to be honest, I don't know what the takeaway is other than just honesty is good, financial transparency is good. But yeah, this is one of those stories where you just kind of go, okay, and you keep on rolling. If you get something out of this beyond those just general things of honesty good, transparency good, go for it. But I don't know if I have a whole lot to offer outside this story other than just it's in there, and it's one of those things that you know gives you the goosebumps or the willies, and that's sometimes what the Bible is about. All right, moving on in verses 12 through 16, we have stories of a lot of healings that are happening. It's interesting to hear that in 12 and 16, it talks about how just people being in Peter's shadow causes some healing. And here in the beginning of Acts, Peter is like the center of things. He's giving the speeches, he's the public face. Ananias and Sapphira die when Peter speaks. His shadow is healing people. So Peter's just kind of the center of things here. Now, I want you to put a pin in that because as this story goes on, we lose track of Peter. We just don't hear about him anymore. So put a pin in Peter right now. He's the center of focus for now, but that shifts and we'll get to that. But for now, we're focusing on Peter. Okay, in verses 17 through 26, we have this story of the disciples getting arrested on the order of the high priest, and then there's this divine breakout that happens. Um, doesn't even disturb the guards or the doors or anything, they're just out, and then they get re-arrested. And in verse 20, they get a commission from their kind of divine rescuer, from the divine messenger involved in the story, that they are to keep proclaiming the news of this life. And that means they're keep telling about, how things are with this new life of following Jesus and this new community, that they're just to keep doing things no matter what happens. And then what happens is after they are rearrested, they're brought before the high council, the priests again. Remember, this just happened. They're brought before them again. And the conversation is basically a repeat where the priests say, please stop. And Peter responds again, can't stop, won't stop. They don't. Now, the high priests are kind of in a pickle and they're thinking, like, okay, we had the same problem with Jesus. We had him crucified, and now there's a whole community. And so, what are we going to do? Like, are we just going to get rid of all these people? What are we supposed to do? And then in verses 33 and 39, there's a really cool speech that a member of the council, Gamaliel, and I'm probably saying that wrong, but Gamaliel gives. And in this speech, in verse 36, Gamaliel mentions some historical precedent. He mentions two revolts and leaders of revolts that take place in history, and that's Theudas. I'm probably saying that wrong too, but Theudas and Judas of Galilee, Judas the Galilean. Now, here's the cool thing. Both of these revolts and their leaders are mentioned by name in the history recorded by Josephus, who is a historian. Doesn't have any sort of faith agenda. Faith Agenda is a historian where we go to for a lot of the history around this time and place in Roman Judea around this time. And Josephus records these revolts around Josephus and Theudas. Now, the timing that's presented here in Acts and also Luke, because it mentions the census that is part of the Christmas story in Luke, the timing here is not kind of square across from the history in Josephus and the account in Acts and Luke when it comes to the census and these revolts. So somewhere the timing is off. And that's okay. That doesn't make or break the story. It's also thought that there were a lot of revolts and uprising and rebels in this time and place during Roman rule. And so it would have been easy for anybody to get them confused and maybe don't have the timing and sequences of events correct. And that's okay. And for our purposes here in Acts, if even things are off by decades, that's okay. It doesn't take away from the story. And it doesn't matter for what Gamaliel is saying either, because what Gamaliel is saying here is, hey, look, we know these things happen, that, we're just in a time and a place where the religious environment is charged. These people come out and say they're some prophet, are some great leader of the people. They cause a lot of stir, and eventually Rome or the powers that be will deal with them. And Gamaliel is saying, here's the deal, and this is in 38 and 39. He says, here's the deal. If this is just a human thing like the others are, it will peter out and we shouldn't make that big of a deal out of it. It will run its course. Either people will get tired of it, it'll change, or Rome will deal with it. So it doesn't need to be our concern. Or he says, if this thing is legit, if this really is a movement of God, a new thing that God is doing, we do not want to be on the wrong side of history on this one. And so Gamaliel convinces with that persuasive argument that the council just kind of leave this alone. Either it will run its natural course, or God's really up to something and we don't want to get in the way of it, even if we're not on board with it. And that convinces the council. And there's just a lot of wisdom in that speech when it comes to things we encounter in life, because we can't understand everything that's going on. And sometimes we just need to stay out the way and let things run their course. We do not have to be the arbiters of everything that comes across us in history and the world and society and in our lives. So if there's some wisdom for that and how you live your life, draw from that. Now, politics being politics, power being power, privilege being privilege, the high council, the priests still have the disciples flogged. They can't just let them go, because that's not how our world works. We always gotta, continue these cycles of violence for no good reason. And so they still have the disciples flogged. And as chapter 5 concludes, even though they've been arrested now kind of 2 times, they've been flogged, they've been told, please stop this, they are more committed than ever still at it. And chapter 5 ends with that can't stop, won't stop. So here in chapter 5, a lot going on, that very interesting story and kind of just creepy story of Ananias and Sapphira. And then the disciples keep doing what they're doing no matter what. Can't stop, won't stop. All right, thanks for watching this video. If you have any questions, send me an email. That email is going to come up at the bumper with the last thing you're going to see here. And so send me those questions. Hope you all have a great day. Thanks for tuning in for the Acts Challenge. See you tomorrow for Acts chapter 6.